the abandoned Arab village of Lifta at the western entrance to Jerusalem. Its inhabitants fled in early 1948, following an attack by Jewish militiamen. It was to this village that the leader of the Jewish community in Palestine, David Ben-Gurion, referred in a speech on February 7, 1948, as he prophesied, in effect, the coming depopulation of the Arab parts of the country.
And this is what he said. From your entry into Jerusalem through Lifta Romema, there are no strangers. And he meant, of course, Arabs. 100% Jews. Since Jerusalem's destruction in the days of the Romans, it hasn't been so Jewish as it is now. And he spoke then about the whole of the country. What had happened in Jerusalem could well happen in great parts of the country if we, that is the Jews, hold on. And if we hold on, it is very possible that in the coming 6 or 8 or 10 months of the war, there will take place great changes, and not all of them to our detriment. Certainly there will be great changes in the composition of the population of the country.
People wanted to have here a Jewish state in a place where there is an Arab majority. How can you do that? There are two possibilities. Or you build an apartheid, and I don't think the Zionist mentality was built for an apartheid. Or you can expel the Arabs. There's no other way.
We went into Jaffa, we counted the population, and we find out that from 85,000 there were left only 3,000.
They put us on trucks during the night. It was cold. We didn't take anything with us. It's a very difficult sight to see people who have to decide in 2 hours what to take with them, what to leave behind, whom to leave behind. Families with children, old men, women.
I said, no danger for you. Stay on here in the village. We will have a Jewish state, you will have a Palestinian state, everything will be all right. They ran away.
It's the most difficult thing in the world to leave one's homeland, to be scattered for 50 years in other people's countries. What could be worse than this? After an exile lasting 2,000 years, Jews began to return to Palestine in the 1880s, fleeing anti-Semitic persecution in Europe. The Arabs living in Palestine resented this influx, but the British, who had conquered the land from the Turks in 1917, nurtured the Zionist movement and periodically crushed Arab resistance. By 1947, however, they had had enough, and the British government returned its mandate over Palestine to the United Nations. On November 29, 1947, the UN General Assembly voted to partition Palestine into 2 independent states, one Jewish, with about 55% of the land, and one Arab, with about 40%. Jerusalem was to be left as an international city. The Yishuv, or Jewish community in Palestine, numbered about 650,000. The Palestinian Arabs about 1.25 million. The Zionist leadership welcomed the partition resolution. The Palestinians and the Arab states rejected it, and Palestinian armed bands began to attack Jewish traffic and neighborhoods. The British announced that they would withdraw the following year, and meanwhile, hostilities between Jews and Palestinians escalated. The surrounding Arab states promised to intervene, but could not do so until the British had departed. Between December 1947 and March 1948, there were violent clashes in towns, villages, and along the roads. The Jews were far better organized, equipped, and led, while the Palestinian national movement was characterized by bitter internal feuding and disarray. Its international standing was undermined by the fact that during World War II, the Palestinian leader, Muslim cleric Hajj Amin al-Husseini, had collaborated with Nazi Germany. This is my grandson, Khalid. My name is Khalid, his name is Khalid too. This is my grandson, Mohammed Rashid. This is my granddaughter, Haifa. I named her Haifa because I love Haifa, my homeland. I gave her the name of my homeland. The battle for the city of Haifa, 100 kilometers north of Tel Aviv on the Mediterranean coast, was a major turning point in the struggle between Jews and Palestinians. The success of the Haganah, the main Jewish militia, decisively affected the remainder of the war. In November 1947, Haifa was a mixed city of about 70,000 Jews and 70,000 Arabs. It had an effective joint municipality and was well managed. Haifa was the richest and most beautiful city and the gateway to the Middle East. There was a pipeline which carried oil from Mosul in Iraq to the refinery in Haifa. There was a cement factory. Syrians used to come over to work, also Egyptians and people from other Arab countries. There was a German colony. It is called Almania to this day. There was no discrimination between the Christians, the Jews and the Muslims. All lived a very good life.
As far as I remember, there was no tension between Arabs and Jews at all. We lived together. Many of the quarters were mixed, mainly on the borders. There were, of course, Jewish quarters and Arab quarters, but on the borders between them, they were mixed, living in the same house. There was some tension growing up because it didn't be all of a sudden the decision in the United Nations. It took some time until they reached their decision. And in between, also the Arabs organized and we organized, and we were already aware that trouble is coming, and we were preparing ourselves.
On the night of the partition resolution, it was a tragedy. Everybody was angry, and we organized demonstrations. In the churches and the mosques, people were angry. The priest in the church refused the partition, and the sheikh refused it. But the Jews were happy, because they were going to have their own state.
I don't think they could accept the partition plan. I don't think anybody could accept the partition plan. Of course, we can be wise now and speak about, retroactively, that the Palestinians should have accepted the partition plan. That is nonsense. The Arab world could never understand why should they divide their land with the Jews. I mean, you can now explain it, etc.
In those years from 1939 until 1948, we had two injustices. One to the Jewish people, the Holocaust. 6 million of our people died. For what did they do? If we would have a state at that time, they could save millions of them. We didn't have.
Only because of the creation of the Palestinian issue, the Jewish question became an Arab question. It was always a European question. We don't know the Jewish question in our history. There is no such question in our history. Not more than a Christian question or an Armenian question. There is no special Jewish question in our history. It's a European issue. And I don't think any Arab would have understood why should they divide Palestine with the Jews.
The other injustice was that we took away the land from the Arabs in the area. How could you build a state without land?
The 7 Arab states reassured us that the Jews were weaklings who could not defeat all the Arabs. They told us to hold out. They sent us weapons, and we felt strong enough to resist until the Arab armies came to liberate Palestine, defeat the Jews, slay them, and throw them into the sea. Between the end of 1947 and the first months of 1948, there was intermittent sniping and bomb attacks. In December 1947, Jewish terrorists killed 7 Arabs with a bomb outside the gates of Haifa's oil refinery. And the Arabs retaliated by slaughtering 39 Jewish refinery workers. From then on, there were periodic clashes. The city's Arab militia was poorly trained, inadequately armed, and often undisciplined. By the end of March 1948, much of Haifa's Arab middle and upper class had abandoned the city.
This is what we couldn't do. We didn't have a place where to go. We had to stay here because there was no place to go. For them it was very easy to go to Lebanon, to go to Shechem, to go to Nazareth. And why should they be here and endure all this fighting which started already and which they knew that it will come.
In the early hours of April 21st, the British forces pulled out of the dividing line between the Arab neighborhoods downtown and the Jewish neighborhoods above them on the slopes of Mount Carmel. The Haganah decided to exploit this new situation, to gain control over the whole city, and on the same day attacked and overran several key Arab positions. We were at home. Some were at the windows carrying weapons, defending their homes, their children, their mothers. Others took precautions. Those who had gold hid it to buy food later if necessary.
They felt that they are in an inferior position, I would say geographically, topographically, because we sat on top of them. So it was much easier for us. For instance, we used drums filled with explosives to roll them down.
The Haganah mortars peppered the Arab neighborhoods for over 24 hours. The military superiority of the Jewish forces was overwhelming, and the Arab population began to panic and flee, with their militia commanders in the lead.
When the Arab defenses started